All right. Welcome, everybody, to a special episode of Ready for It, the Rideshare Guy podcast, the Rideshare Rodeo podcast, and the Gig Economy podcast. We're going to be doing a super fun, basically roundtable discussion. So I think hopefully we'll all chat about equally, but maybe we can track stats and who sort of hogs the mic. But I'm excited to have Jason Tieri on from the Gig Economy podcast. He's been doing it since 2017. He's based in Michigan. And if you're watching on YouTube channel, you can see he's got a beard to match. He definitely has got the Michigan vibe going. And if you're listening on audio right now, this just encourages you to go check out one of our YouTube channels so you can see the video version too. We've also got Steve Johnson from Rideshare Rodeo. He's been doing his podcast since April 2020, and right in the middle of start of the pandemic, really. So that was cool to see you start that up, Steve. I know a lot of drivers and gig workers out there have really appreciated all of the content and companionship that you've been putting out there. And he's also been running his website, uberliftdrivers.com, for 5 years. So he's based in Colorado too. So we're actually, now that I think about it, I'm here in LA. Steve, you're in Colorado. Jason is in Michigan, and we've got the whole nation covered somewhat, coast to coast. So I'm excited to chat, dig in. We're gonna basically look back, on briefly on the year 2021, sort of what happened, everything that went down, or not everything that went down, but a couple observations. We'll talk about the current state of rideshare industry and also delivery. Obviously, we've seen a huge shift to the delivery side and last mile side. We'll talk about some predictions on the COVID impact in the gig economy going forward. One thing that we're all excited for in 2022, I think that'll be good to hear from Steve and Jason, their predictions for 2022. So we'll basically start making stuff up and see if our predictions come true. And then also what can be improved for gig workers in 2022. We've got 3 guys on here. Would have been nice maybe to have a female contributor at some point. Maybe that'll be our next episode. Yeah. But for now, you've got 3 guys who've been covering the rideshare and gig economy for quite a while, and talked to probably tens of thousands of drivers, and really I appreciate the 2 of you for all the content that you're putting on. So I'm going to take a break from talking now and just let each one of you do a little bit of a more deep intro and sort of talk about yourself and your podcast, and then we'll get into things. So Jason, I'm looking at you if you want to start and take the mic.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on, Harry. I've always wanted to connect with you, but I never did, because I've always said Harry's like the OG of the podcast world with rideshare. I mean, you really are. I don't know anyone else. I'm sure there was somebody before you, but maybe that never really took the reins. But I appreciate it. So when you emailed me, it meant a lot, actually. So I appreciate that. I've been doing the podcast since 2017 and actually started out as GR Rideshare Adventures back when it was just Uber and Lyft. There was nothing else. And then over time, we actually had to rebrand, right? Because rideshare, right before the pandemic, we rebranded to the Gig Economy podcast because it blew up, with delivery and those things like that. So we've had a couple of co-hosts that have come and gone. Just, how the gig working goes. People come and go. Me, myself, I do gig work in the wintertime from November to March full time, and then I do lawn fertilization in the summer. So I don't do a ton of gig work in the summer months, but so that's kind of who we are. We just recorded our 100th episode. We've got more than 100, but 100th like live stream where we've just had a regular show. So that was really fun. Steve was on there, bought us a bottle of booze. So if you listen to that episode towards the end, I'm getting I had 2 glasses of whiskey and it got a little sketch at the end, but
nice. Well, we're recording this one in the morning. So I think at least a couple of us have coffee, and Jason, hopefully you don't fall asleep because it's probably after lunch for you and, maybe a nap time, but that's awesome to hear. Steve, what about yourself with Rideshare Rodeo?
So Rideshare Rodeo started in 2019, April, right at the pandemic. I'd looked at starting it a few months before, and I had a couple ideas, but then the pandemic hit, and then I was like, just going to put it all off. And then when the pandemic hit, the very first thing I did was start the podcast and do nothing that I meant the podcast to be, which was just helping people with PUA, who really needed it, because none of us understood it. Yeah. And I wasn't one that needed it the whole time, or needed to do that. But people from every state were so confused, and the systems were all locked, you guys know. And So I just kind of started that way and then just kind of morphed out of it.
Mhm.
Uber Lyft driver's been going 5 years now. We've got 3,600 articles
Wow.
now. And yeah, the timeline's sometimes when I go back on the timeline, it's crazy. From the day I started was about a month before Dara Travis had to leave the company.
Mm.
So it's really hectic, crazy times in the very
Yeah.
beginning there. But yeah, the podcast has been going great. It's been a nice crossover with Uber Lyft drivers. Some of those people came over to the podcast. Some of the podcast people went over to there. And then just about 6 months ago, I started a YouTube channel, do a couple live
Cool.
streams here and there, and I've met some of that community as well. So yeah, everything's going really good.
Nice. Well, I'm excited to chat with both of you because I think that you bring a sort of unique perspective, and it's cool that we're all kind of meshing into one. Jason, like you mentioned, I guess I am, the OG of, really the rideshare and gig economy space in general. For those who don't know, I started my blog, podcast, and YouTube channel actually in 2014. So that's 7-8 years ago now, and not many people make it that long in the gig economy. So that's sort of what I've seen a couple waves come and go. The Travis at Uber wave, the Dara at Uber wave is still
Right.
going on, right? The unemployment or the employment battles, right, that happened like last presidential cycle and this cycle. So it's been interesting for me, really kind of, I started off driving for Uber and Lyft, and then I was, delivering for DoorDash. And, I've seen a lot of trends and waves come and go. And it's funny that you guys talked about rebranding because that's, I'm still known as the rideshare guy, but really, over the past 2 years, I bet similar to you guys. I mean, most of our most popular content, most of our revenue has actually come more from the last mile delivery services. So Instacart, DoorDash, Postmates, Uber Eats, and even lots of the other ones like Curry and, Point Pickup and all of these other Walmart, Spark, right? All of these other opportunities that are out there now, which I'm sure we'll talk about more on the podcast. So that's sort of my story. And just a quick thing about my podcast is that, I actually started it because I kind of, figured, hey, I'm driving for Uber and Lyft. There's other people driving for Uber and Lyft. Like, duh, should probably start a podcast so people could listen while they're driving. And we've been doing about an episode every week or two for 7 years, so we're at a couple hundred episodes now. And so obviously here and there it took sometimes take a couple weeks off, but the funny thing is that actually our YouTube channel and our blog have always been a lot more popular, I guess you would say, than the podcast if you look at like pure download numbers or listens. But I do feel like I really love the podcast medium because audio is very intimate, right? Like you have someone in your ear for 45 minutes, right? Like people at the end of this episode, if they're listening on audio or even watching on video, are probably going to feel like they really know us versus, just reading some article. So that's always, been one of the reasons why I've been a big fan, of the podcast. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I've always been passionate about podcasting. I've listened to Joe Rogan. I know I don't anymore. I kind of hated that he went to Spotify. I kind of feel like he was a sellout, so I stopped listening to him. So I'm kind of
well, Jason, when someone offers you a couple $100 million for your podcast, you let me know how you feel.
I know. I'd have done it for 50 grand. I mean, come on, no. But so yeah, I've always loved podcasting, and so I was just like, you know what, I need to start a podcast, and so the rest is history. I now have another podcast and a production company in podcasting. So I've been going nuts.
Very cool. Well, if I need a new editor in the future, I know who to call.
I would love to edit it for you.
Well, for now, I've got Jennifer on my team who's probably listening to this and post editing right now. Jennifer, you're doing a great job. Appreciate all your work. And don't worry, Jason isn't stepping on your toes anytime soon.
I'm the backup. I'm the backup. Yeah.
All right. So let's dig into it, guys. Let's look back briefly. I mean, I don't think we need to like do a total recap on 2021, but I'd love to know, like what's something that really stood out to you or surprised you from 2021, Steve?
From 2021.
That would be last year.
Last year as of hours ago. Yeah. Well, I guess one of the things, was that like the last time you and I talked, Harry, and we did kind of one of these actually.
Yeah.
We just kind of talked about what some things could happen. That was in that was like late summer 2021.
Oh wow. Well, it seemed like a lot longer than that.
Yeah, it wasn't. But it's crazy to me because I've been waiting for that tipping point for food delivery. Like, okay, there's even when I was talking with Sergio, and I had him on. You know, it's like we were discussing, like, you know, he was saying, well, the tipping point is here, and I was thinking to myself, it is, but then it comes back and it's not. Like every time there's a little pop in the news about Omni or the new COVID or this, that, and the other, it's like food delivery goes right back up. So I guess one of my things is that I think that once we see true getting out of this pandemic, that then we're going to start to see delivery go down some, because here in Denver, people are back out there. I know that when
you say delivery go down, you mean like earnings, demand, you know, basically, I guess like
just
right now, just like the interest level in delivery kind of recede, basically.
That, but also like even the pay is already going down a little. But I mean, I think these drivers are going to see what we saw in rideshare many years ago. You know, I mean, I think, you know, I mean, look at the start of the pandemic, $100 cash tips. You know, that kind of stuff that was just you know, what you call the unicorn, but everything was the unicorn. Right. So that makes it not a unicorn. So I don't know. I feel like every time we get a surge, everybody locks themselves back up, starts using the services again, because they've all got them on their phones. And it gives it that pop again. But once I think we stop seeing these variants, or that it's not on the news 24/7 and more normal life, I think that way too many drivers pivoted to food. I think they didn't pivot back. I think that way too many drivers aren't back yet. And I think that there's going to be a massive oversaturation of delivery drivers at some point.
Yeah, I think that's sort of one thing, you know, again, right? Like I've been doing this for 7 years. And I remember a lot of times in the early days, right? Like you would have higher earnings, or you'd have good opportunities on Uber and Lyft specifically. And then one of the big complaints, you know, that we always hear was, first, you know, when Uber and Lyft would cut rates, obviously that would piss everyone off, right? That was like always the biggest complaint. And then second, though, there were always times like January to March, for example. We just did an article and a video, you know, this is like typically the slowdown, right? They call it like the January slowdown for rideshare. And, you know, that's like when a lot of drivers would feel like there's this oversaturation of drivers, right? Because the great thing about Uber and Lyft in the gig economy, it's so easy to get onboarded and signed up, right? It's like, boom, you know, and I signed up for my couch, and, you know, the next day I'm driving, right? That's great. But since it's so easy, that also means that like everyone and their mother can do it. So during times where demand drops, you still have all that supply, right? And so you're like, now, oh shit, you know, I gotta, you know, compete with all these other drivers and all of that, right? So that kind of lends itself well to the companies. You know, you brought up a few good things that we'll definitely hit on in a bit, Steve. But first, Jason, I'm curious. You have done Uber and Lyft. Have you also done food delivery?
Yeah, that's kind of all I do right now, honestly. Well, let me take that back. I do Walmart Spark.
Okay.
And I gotta say, like, at least in my market, it's really good.
So you know what? That's funny. We're actually looking for a driver to interview right now about Walmart Spark, because we've been hearing pretty good things. So maybe we should talk to you, Jason, off the podcast.
Yeah, I'm loving it. I'm sure the rates will go down. They just started actually in my area Shop and Deliver, which is like Shipt or Instacart, but they don't pay like crap.
How does delivery work with Walmart Spark, and how much money can you make?
So it's very similar. I've done Shipt and Instacart, very little Instacart because the pay is bad. Shipt, okay. It's very similar. The app is okay. You just shop it and deliver it. There's not much to it, but my minimum right now is $20. So that's really good, because typically
per order.
And that means it could be a 3-item order or a 25-item order. Now it kind of goes up above 25. The price starts to go up a little bit. But I mean, if I'm doing these small orders, I can do 40 an hour.
Wow. $40 an hour.
Yeah. So I love it. And
yeah, I mean, I feel like I haven't heard of a $20 minimum per order on a grocery. Like Instacart is like what, $6 or $8 per minimum, right? Like a lot lower.
Yeah. I haven't done Instacart in a while, but I'm sure those rates will drop. I'm thinking because it's new. You know,
and you're also in Michigan, which you know, I mean, what city are you driving in Michigan?
Grand Rapids.
So it's what, like a medium-sized city, not huge, but pretty big, right?
We got we're the second biggest city in Michigan. Okay. Other than Detroit, and I have probably access to about 6 or 7 Walmarts. So
Oh, wow. Okay. So a lot of
Yeah.
Walmarts. And I mean, the two things that stand out to me is like, number one, if they're paying 20 minimum in Michigan, I imagine in other cities, it might even like LA, San Francisco, Atlanta, right, might even be higher. And then number two, you brought up a really good point that I've seen over and over is like when these services are new, man, they pay a lot, right? It pays to like, that's why I think it's so valuable if people are listening to podcasts and YouTube channels and like trying to figure out like what's the next best service. Cause this Walmart Spark, it may not last forever, but who knows what's going on at Walmart, and they may just be saying like, hey, our shareholders want to see, I don't know, this type of growth with Walmart Sparks. Let's go ahead and, pay crazy amounts. Like who knows what's going on there, but it could be just, that what that means for you as a driver is that you've got really big earnings potential, with Walmart Spark right now. And it may not last forever, but while the getting's good, take advantage of it, right?
I feel like every time I come back from lawn care, there's a new app that's new that I focus on that season. So who knows? We don't have GoPuff by us. It's supposed to come. So maybe next year when I come back, that'll be booming. I don't know.
Yeah. Steve, are there any apps that you've seen, in the past year, that you're looking forward to, I guess in 2022? Sorry, I'm going to struggle to keep. It's like, okay, last year was 2021. This year was 2022. Are there any apps that you sort of like saw emerge? I mean, obviously we know the obvious ones, the rideshare, the delivery, the big guys, but are there any other apps that you saw emerge that are kind of like, whoa, not a lot of like, I think Walmart Spark's a perfect example. Are there any other like Walmart Sparks out there that you're keeping an eye on?
Well, so recently I had one podcast listener of a long time ask me why I've done the ride shares, why I've done over 25,000 rides, why I've done delivery, why I've done all these curry, all these other ones, but I've never done food delivery or grocery delivery. I mean. And they were like, you talk about all these spaces and that you do them all, but you've never done these. So I was like, all right, enough. So I did a 2-week challenge of Shipt and Instacart just
nice.
The past about 3 weeks ago and just stopped it. And I learned a lot because I'd already heard all the negative stories about Instacart, but I'd also heard them about Shipt. And to be honest, I thought Shipt was again, it's my market. Here in Denver, Shipt was great. It was great to me. And Jason and I were talking last night and he pointed out maybe it was the holidays, but some of it seemed holidays, but it also just seemed very busy. And I know that the Shipt customers pay a monthly or yearly fee. It's not just.
And for those who don't know, what is Shipt? It's Target's delivery basically outfit.
It's Target's, but it's also like Sprouts, Petco.
Oh, okay.
It does like Office Max. Like I took a ream of paper to somebody, a specialty paper from there, and made $22 to drive a mile and a half.
Wow.
For one ream.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's obviously a lot of money. So that's great for you. I mean, it's interesting that like, I guess that's the other thing that I feel like I've learned over time, right? Like a lot of times you have to think about like, what's the downside to trying out these services? Like, I don't think you need to go and sign up for like 10 or 20, but, sort of keep an eye on like the things that I would look for. It's like, what are the new services popping up? Like Jason, you mentioned GoPuff, right? Like if GoPuff, they're like a 15-20 billion dollar company. So I'm like, when they launch in my market, I should probably like sign up for their email list or keep an eye on them, right? And so that when they do launch, I'm ready for, right? And a lot of times if they don't have a driver thing that you can sign up for, you can sign up as a customer to be notified when they launch in your market, right? So you can kind of take advantage of that when you get that email like, hey, you can order from us in the future, we're going to launch on this date. It's like, boom, let me go to Craigslist or find a way to sign up for them because you can get those bonuses and take advantage of that. And then Shipt, is another one. Like they're pretty big service, but it's cool that like they're paying, they're not an Uber, Lyft, a DoorDash, an Instacart, right? But I mean, sounds like you're, probably at that time, making more with them than some of these other apps, right?
Well, I also wonder how much of that money though, because I'm part of my money was great tips. I mean, which is something we don't talk about much with many of these platforms because you might get tips some, but it's never great tips. That's not a comment you make often. Great tips.
But you live kind of, and Harry does too, kind of in a more not affluent, but it feels like there's more money in those areas. Like my side of town, everyone's Dutch. So like,
Yeah.
Dutch. I've never heard that before, Jason. It's like, oh yeah, my side of town is where the Dutch people live.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
It's true. It's
Well, you know, it's really weird, Harry, is that I'm originally from Michigan too. And that just north of Jason is where we have our family cabin up in a little town called Calava. And the town's like population 1,500. And that whole town is all Finnish because my family's from Finland.
Very cool.
So Michigan gets a lot of that. I don't know what it is. There's different
actually,
like,
yeah. No,
areas
I know. I've seen little pockets in Michigan. I think that there's like some. I saw that like I feel like African, immigrant communities. I've seen stories about that in Michigan. So that's pretty cool. Pretty interesting.
I think they all moved there because of the auto industry in the beginning. And
yeah,
around,
I'm sure that there's
post World War II, because like a lot of my family members that are Finnish, signed up to go into the military of some sorts. And
that's cool. Yeah, no, I'm sure there's some historical reason. But I want to stick on this rideshare versus last mile delivery point for a second, because I think this is really interesting. So we've talked about all these new services, and I think we've given some good advice on keep an eye out on Walmart Spark and Shipt, and try some of these, look for the new ones like GoPuff that are going to be launching in your market. These are good earning opportunities. But what about rideshare? Because, my original question, Steve, right, was, looking back on 2021, what's one thing that stood out to you? And I guess my answer to my own question would be, man, like there's some pretty high earnings on Uber and Lyft, right? Like we've been, so you had Sergio who's one of our top contributors. He drives out here in LA, and, his nickname is Surge EO because he's always chasing the surge. I know, pretty lame dad joke, but we've been posting pretty consistently the past few months about his earnings, and I mean, literally like screenshots every week. And this is in LA, a top market. Average, I think Uber has said the average earnings in LA is around $30 to $34 an hour over the past 6 months or so, and obviously that goes up and down a little, but Sergio has been consistently earning $50 to $60 an hour, right? And so he's a good driver. I'd say he's probably one of the top 1% or 5% drivers. Like he really knows what he's doing. He's very aggressive about when and where he drives. He does about 20 hours a week. So it's not, nothing, right? But it's 20 hours a week and makes $1,000 plus every single week. We always post his screenshots, because everyone's like, oh, I don't believe this, right? Like, dude, come on. And, he's in LA too. But I guess like my point is, I think that if you really know what you're doing on Uber and Lyft over the past year, like, I don't know, is there anything that can beat Uber and Lyft if you know what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, like for Jason's market, I'm not sure. Like for mine, Denver has really grown over the past few years. We're at 800,000 people now here in the Denver metro. So that's getting pretty big. We're definitely getting a little overpopulated. There's always been a rideshare need here. There were those months that nowhere in the country was there a rideshare need in the very beginning. But as it started coming back, we did too, because a lot of people, I mean, this is starting to happen all over the US, but here in Denver, a lot of people don't own cars. Because with a car comes, if you live in an apartment downtown, with a car comes a $500 a month parking spot that you have to pay. So on top of the car, you got to pay to park it. You got to walk a certain distance. So I think people just got into rideshare. Like, dude, I can just get all my rides in for a tenth of the price of owning a car. Yeah. And I know that sounds weird to some people, like you can't ride show that much, and you really can. I mean, if everything's kind of short and whatnot, it really, and it's not your car, but I think it's more just people's comfort level with coming back to rideshare.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that they've said, right, and especially if you've been looking at it from the customer side, demand has been sort of off the charts, right? And supply is somewhat limited, right? Because like you said, Steve, a lot of people have stopped working. A lot of people took unemployment. A lot of people switched over to food delivery. A lot of people moved into their mom's basement. A lot of people started trading crypto. A lot of people are just like, F this, I'm not going to work anymore, right? There's a bunch of different reasons, which I think, both of you have talked about, but it does seem like, I guess it does seem like, if you really care about earning the most, I think on average, right, there might be little pockets or little opportunities here and there, but I would say on average, I still feel pretty strongly that Uber and Lyft pay the best. And I do agree that I don't think everyone has like kind of come back to driving for Uber and Lyft, but I do feel pretty strongly that they pay the best. What do you think, Jason?
See, I'm in a totally different boat than you guys. I feel it's terrible over here. I've not gone back to rideshare.
Interesting.
I we're not seeing the earnings. I mean, we have a group that we have about 40 people in throughout the country, and everyone in Grand Rapids talks in there, and they're like, yeah, this is terrible. Like early on there was the $100 bonus if you did 3 rides, which I never got, by the way.
I did it.
Did you? I would have done the 3 rides for $100. I mean, come on.
I mean, that's pretty hard to say no to, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I did a bonus one day with Lyft. It was 10 rides for 150. Okay, I'll do it. But I felt like I was driving all over God's green earth and using all this gas in this time where I could do food delivery right in my little small area. The furthest I drive might be 7 miles. I've not gone back to passengers. I just don't think the money's there in our market, at least.
Interesting. I mean, so one thing I definitely have seen and noticed, and, Uber did an earnings call recently and talked about this a little bit. There are huge differences in the recovery of Uber's marketplace from market to market. Like they said in New York City, for example, and I looked up this data because they released the TLC data from New York City. So you can actually see the number of Uber drivers and rides and trips and stuff like that. Like they do 400,000 that Uber does 500,000 trips a day in New York City, which is pretty crazy to think about. And they said that New York City had somewhat recovered. It was back down to like 5-minute ETAs, but Los Angeles, on the other hand, where I live, has been pretty bad, right? Like I don't think as a customer, I don't think I've gotten a ride in 5 minutes in like a year or more, right? And they're basically saying that like New York City and Miami are some of our best markets. LA is some of our worst markets because it's more spread out. There are a lot of people. There's a lot to do, right? So there's a lot of demand, right? And so that means that drivers are kind of driving all over the place to there's not enough drivers to meet the demand. So it's interesting. Like there are definitely regional differences, and I guess if you're a driver, like what you would want to look at is like what selfishly, like you kind of want as much demand as possible and as few drivers on the road as possible, right? Because that keeps you busy and means surge pricing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, but then you also have to throw in the pandemic. I mean, one of our drivers here in Grand Rapids, he went back to passengers, and sure enough, he got COVID.
Yeah.
Why did I go back to passengers?
I mean, that's a perfect segue into COVID, right? Because you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, right? They would say like, okay, you don't want to be in an enclosed space and you don't want to be less than 6 feet. And you're like, if I'm driving, like immediately when they get into the car, it's like they break that. So it's like, this seems like probably the worst activity you could do, in a pandemic. What do you guys think about, like, what are your predictions on like the COVID impact for the gig economy going forward? Like, do you think that, it's going to, like, every time there's a new variant or something like that, like what you were talking about, Steve, there's going to be like people, pulling back from rideshare, ordering more delivery? Or do you think we're kind of like, how do you think COVID, like, I don't, we're not like experts on COVID, but like, how do we think COVID's going to impact the gig economy going forward? What do you think, Steve?
So in my market, people, I don't want to say have given up, but people have, given up, but people have kind of given up with the COVID protocols. They're just like, even if like another one came out and tried to make it all scary and gloom and doom and all that, people are just over it. I mean, like I was in the grocery store by me the other day, and we have a police officer that stands in that grocery store pre-pandemic, pandemic, whatever. And right as I walked in, they got the intercom going. It says, all guests must be masked. All workers must be masked. Whether you're vaccinated or not, you must be masked. And we just had recently gone back to that. While I was hearing that, the cop didn't even have his mask around his chin. It was just gone. Yeah. He's typing on his phone. Not one worker had a mask on. Not one person in the store had a mask on, and this is playing.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I just feel like, at least here in Denver, people are over COVID. Yeah. And they're willing to take their shots with these lower grade, Omicron variants and whatnot that, hey, look, if you get Omicron, it's in most cases, it's like a fifth of the flu.
Yeah.
It's a cold.
It does seem like people are kind of over it, and I would say kind of like drivers and riders, in the sense that, okay, like we're 2 years into the pandemic, like definitely at the beginning, we would see like, okay, at the beginning, like a lot of people are like, shit, I don't want to drive right now. Right. And I don't blame them, right? Because you're like, okay, unknown pandemic, is this like really deadly or whatever? And, it seems like being in a closed space, with someone breathing on you for hours a day seems like a bad idea during a pandemic that you know nothing about. So that totally makes sense at the start. And it does seem like now, like, okay, Omicron is out. It's this variant. Everyone's getting COVID. I got COVID 2 weeks ago. It was very mild. I was vaccinated, very mild, like no issues. And, it seems though, like with Omicron, people are kind of over it. Like I haven't been hearing a lot of complaints from drivers yet that it's like, whoa, Omicron variant, like I can't get a ride, or, it's like, I can't get a ride anymore. Or, I don't want to drive anymore. Like I feel like that has sort of come and gone. So I'm kind of feeling like going forward, I don't think COVID is going to be like a big impact on the gig economy. I think you might see like like a little bump in food delivery, if like at the peak of Omicron, but I don't think it's going to be crazy. Like, wow, this is like early pandemic. What do you think, Jason, out there in Michigan?
Yeah, I think we're seeing the same thing over here. People not caring. Although the people in the store, at least by us, everyone's wearing a mask. And I started wearing a mask again. I'm vaccinated, boosted, whatever, when I do shop at Walmart. But yeah. I think once we get through the winter, I think people don't care anymore. And then the numbers are going to go down, right? Because obviously we're all enclosed here in Michigan. I mean, we got a winter storm warning starting tomorrow. So that's going to be fun. And I think rideshare will be back. I honestly think once the summer hits, it's going to be back full. And I hope to get back to it if the money's there. I go where the money's at, Harry.
Yeah.
If the money is not in rideshare, I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah. Well, that's actually an interesting point. I mean, I do feel like in general, like the number one reason people work in the gig economy is money, I think, and I don't know that that's exclusive to gig economy. I mean, every job, right? Like it's a job for a reason, right? Like you do a job because you need the money. Obviously, there's a ton of flexibility that comes with the gig economy. So that's like a nice number two, right? Like I would much rather do 40 hours a week at Uber than 40 hours a week at McDonald's if the earnings were the same, right? But I do feel like, do you think people like I've been like, one thing I was kind of wrong about in 2021 is that I thought once unemployment ended, I thought that this worker shortage, this driver shortage on rideshare would kind of go away, right? And I don't think that it's actually, I think it's still like, I mean, you look at LA, right? Like you can still make 50, 60 bucks an hour. Sergio's out there still killing it, which means that frankly, like there's probably not enough drivers still, right? In a lot of cities, a lot of places. I'm kind of surprised that more people haven't come back to rideshare. So that was like one thing. I thought like as unemployment expired, I didn't think it would be overnight, like everyone would come back to driving for Uber and Lyft. But I did think like more people would come back to driving for Uber and Lyft. And that's kind of been one thing I've been wrong about. What do you guys think?
Do you think though that a lot of people didn't go back to driving because they went to food delivery because they didn't want to deal with COVID?
So I think it was a combination, right? Like I think it was definitely like pretty obvious, right? Like huge shift to food delivery during the pandemic, right? Because at the beginning of the pandemic, remember, food and grocery delivery were like off the charts. Demand was crazy, tips were crazy, and there, no one wanted to drive, right? So if you wanted to make money during that time, you had to do food delivery, right? And then kind of like over the next year or two, I think a lot of people kind of like you were saying, Jason, right? They realize like, hey, it's kind of nice doing food delivery. I stay in my little area, I never get like a 20-mile, ride, or like in LA, like a 50-mile ride to Orange County and then have to drive back empty. If I can make, even comparable or even a little bit less, like, I don't have to deal with people, no one puking in my car, right? Like, I get someone for, I can't deliver an order here and there and then I get a free burrito, like there's some funny benefits here and there, of delivery. But I guess like I always thought people were most motivated by like where you could earn the most. And I think you can earn the most on Uber and Lyft on average, not every city, like you said, Jason. But I feel like maybe that's not as motivating as it used to be, like before the pandemic, I feel like everyone kind of gravitated towards Uber and Lyft if they wanted to earn the most. And now, like, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I agree. Pre-pandemic, I did almost exclusively rideshare, a little bit of Amazon Flex, but yeah, it was exclusively. And then since the pandemic, I've probably done a total of 15 rides.
So
what do you think,
yeah,
Steve?
Well, so I'm going to go back to what you were saying about, when you and I talked last, Terry, like it was, we both kind of agreed that, when PUA ended, we didn't think it was going to be that day, but we thought, well, it's going to have to shift back because there's way too many people in food. It's died off a bit and there's nobody in rideshare. The riders were they were already coming back before PUA was over. And then the drivers didn't come back, and you and I both thought they would. So I guess one of the biggest things I'm wondering about, and this goes even beyond the gig economy, is if you squirreled away some money somehow during the pandemic, which doesn't even make a lot of sense, but if you did and you're able to quit your job or you're able to not go back to rideshare, what are all these people doing?
Yeah. Well, so I do have a few theories. So this will be fun to chat about. I want to hear what you guys think about my theories. So at the start, I thought the two big reasons were shift to food delivery and PUA, right? I mean, one thing that was actually pretty cool in 2020, and it sounds like Steve, you had this, sort of similar feeling, is that man, there were a lot of drivers and gig workers taking advantage of PUA, right? And so it's kind of cool to be helping them, and it was challenging and complex to navigate. But obviously, when people got $1,000 or thousands of dollars of checks in the mail, they'd be very thankful to you, right? There was one video that we did on the EIDL, which was this $1,000 grant, and it ended up getting like hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube, and it's pretty cool. If you go look at the comments on that video, everyone's like, just got my $1,000 check deposited. Thanks so much, guys. Like, it was kind of a cool feeling. Like I wasn't the one giving them the money, but obviously we helped them, or, we walked them through the application process. So they're really thankful. And it was funny. A Washington Post article ended up coming out that said that Uber drivers, Uber and Lyft drivers were the #1 recipient of that EIDL grant. So
wow.
like the job selection that people put down for that EIDL grant, they like crunched all the numbers, and Uber and Lyft drivers were the #1 like category for EIDL. I mean, it was $1,000 grant, but still, it's like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of drivers or millions, took advantage of that. And so that was pretty cool to see. But so I feel like the shift to food delivery and the PUA, all of the unemployment, that whole EIDL, PPP, all of that stuff, like really helped drivers, not have to work through that period if they didn't want to, or if they got COVID or whatever it might be. And I feel like now it's sort of like the other things that people have done is, some people have stuck with food delivery. Some, like, I wasn't joking. Like, I honestly think like some people have moved back into their mom's basement and they're like, hey, like, I don't need to work as much, or I don't need to work as hard. Right. Or like, honestly, like a lot of people are trading crypto. Like a lot of younger people I've noticed, like I've met so many like 20 to 30-year-olds that are just like, and if you look at like crypto and stocks and basically every asset class last year, like you could have been kind of a dumbass and just put money into any of these asset classes and made a lot of money, because like the asset classes as a whole are up 10, 20, 30, or in like crypto's case, like probably 50 to 100%. So imagine, you got like a few $1,000s during the pandemic, you've been investing in crypto this whole time, like you're actually making money this whole time. Now, obviously, if the market starts doing poorly, you're gonna be like, oh crap, I got to get back to Uber and Lyft. But, on the whole, like there are a lot of other, kind of like opportunities or other things going on out there. And I feel like that's sort of what's happening.
I mean, I guess I don't have that attitude because I got a pretty good PPP loan because I applied for it. I worked a lot. I still kept working. I put it in my savings account. I mean, I don't understand people that would get something like that and be like, yeah, I'm not going to work anymore. I'm just going to sit home. But maybe there are people like that. I'm not.
Oh, really? I feel like most people are kind of like that.
Yeah, like, I was gonna say, Jason, though, for you though, you were already in your season of working outdoors.
Right.
And outdoors was a safer environment.
Yeah. No, I guess you're right. I got my PPP loan late in the pandemic. So, I mean, things were back to, normal anyways, but I still wouldn't do that. I mean, even
but I'm just saying, like, you felt good about going to work. Like a lot of people, if you're going to go back to Uber, you're sitting in a car.
True.
If you go back to a store, you're sitting around other people. Like if you go back to work just as a cashier at Target, you're around tons of Target employees. So one catches it, you're all going to catch it.
Yeah. But anyway,
I mean, I'm not saying that makes it right for those people or whatever, but to each his own scenario. I do know a lot of people who only did rideshare, and even if they wanted to continue, there was no rideshare to do.
Yeah, but that's on them. We've talked about that on the podcast for years. You got to diversify yourself. You got to be ready to, when one takes a dump or you get deactivated, DoorDash is famous for that. You got to be ready to pivot and go to another app. So
of course, and we feel that way, but there are some drivers who are immigrants or things like that who really maybe don't have all those opportunities.
True.
And then if you don't have a W-2 job, you can't collect unemployment. This was the first time in history that's happened. So
apparently I'm a hard ass and Steve's a softie.
No, I agree with you. I think that everybody should have an arsenal under their belt and be ready to pivot. Cause you just said, the one major word, deactivate.
Yeah.
And deactivate is you better have something backed up, because otherwise you're done that day.
And I do see people being frustrated with, in our area, Uber and Lyft not doing well. I'm like, then why are you still doing it? Like, what is the point? I don't know.
I mean, I think there's something there, Jason. I'd like to unravel it because, we were sort of talking about like who's this on, right? Who's the responsibility here, right? And I do think that like a lot of people, they get into the gig, right? We had talked about earlier about how easy it is to get signed up and get started, right? So it's like imagine, but you're actually like signing up to run your own business, right? And I think that's the disconnect is people don't realize like, hey, I think I'm signing up to like work at Starbucks. They tell me when, they tell me where to work, what I have to do, right? That's not really the gig economy. And if you kind of do it that way, that's probably, I wouldn't say it's the worst way to do it, but there are much better ways to do it, right? And so like in my courses and in my books, that's kind of what we talk about. It's like, boom, you get signed up for Uber, pick one or the other, and then diversify, right? Sign up for an Uber, sign up for a Lyft, maybe add a food delivery service so that, A, if there's better earnings opportunities out there, or B, something beyond your control, you get deactivated. I mean, on Twitter right now, right before I came on, driver messaged me and he said, "Oh, I'm dealing with this. I think it was Uber Eats deactivation, and he, I don't know. They were saying that he'd been canceling too many orders or something like that." And I'm like, "Dude, sign up for DoorDash, sign up for Insta." You know what I mean? Like you got to have all these in your. He was kind of acting like this was the end of the world, so it kind of made me think that he probably doesn't have a backup. And once you get deactivated, it's like too late, right? Now you got to go sign up for another service or deal with it. Like we all have called Uber support, and we know that that's like banging your head against the wall, right? So. And that's kind of right. It's kind of like that's why I do like the gig economy. I think it's such great practice for running your own business, for running a real business. So that's kind of why, I think the three of us, we try to help people navigate all that.
If they treat it that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't because they're only doing 10 hours a week, right? They're like, I don't care. I'm only doing
or they just don't. They sign up, they work it a ton. And in the beginning, like we all know, the honeymoon period, it's like, you're getting all these orders. You're like, oh, I'm doing great. And then it slows down. It's your business. If it slows down, you can't say Uber did that just to get because you know what? They might have given you, I mean, they shouldn't be according to the algorithm, but they might have been making sure you're getting some good orders so you understand the feel and
I would do that if I was a hiring manager. I'd make it easy for my new employees or my new workers.
You'd throw them
kind of, throw them a bone here and there.
Yeah, exactly. Or you give them some easy rides to get it down and things like that. I mean, like, but then when they, kind of pull that plug and you're on your own, then it's like people start pointing at the companies all the time. Like, well, this, and this and this. It's like, man, again, I think you missed the part that it's your business when you signed up.
So, what's one thing that you guys think can be improved for gig workers in 2022? I'll let you either focus on rideshare, delivery, or everyone in general. But, what's one thing you'd like to see or one thing, you can make it realistic or not realistic, but, what's one thing that you'd like improved or, seen something added for gig workers in 2022?
I think I just would like to see more loyalty from the companies for the drivers or that do, whether it be rideshare or food delivery. I know they have the top dasher and blah, blah, blah. But that's not enough for me. I just would like to see a little bit more loyalty and of course I'd like to see more money, right? That's the obvious thing, but I'm not going to say that, but just maybe some more perks that go along with being a good driver. Steve's done so many rides. He got paid the same for someone signing up the next day, right? They got paid the same, but he is much more skillful. And I'm not saying, give him the world, but maybe a little extra something. I don't know. Whatever it is, just some sort of more loyalty and rewards, I guess. Something basic.
I like that. I mean, I will say that this is one thing that I've always felt the companies have done terrible job of. And if they're doing, I guess the bad about that is that it's kind of sucks for top drivers like Steve or, Jay on my team who had done 25,000 trips and was a 5-star rated driver. And, he got deactivated. I remember we did this big story because he got deactivated over a background check that was like a DMV error, right? And it was like totally not his fault. And he like couldn't get back on Uber and Lyft or Uber. And it's like, man, you guys have like one of your top 1% drivers here and you're like screwing him over and pissing him off. And it's like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, why can't he call into support and have priority support? You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. And, I think that there's a lot of easy wins for the companies, but I think it comes down to, if you're a top driver, you should be rewarded, maybe financially, maybe with certain products, maybe with certain, a free ride every month. There's lots of stuff, free meal every month. There's lots of like a free jacket, you know what I mean? Like there's lots of like small stuff that I think they can do for their top drivers. And I feel like, to be honest, I think the companies like I don't think they're really prioritizing it right now, but I do think that that's like one big opportunity for them in the future.
Yeah, we had Subway around here for like 3 months. I don't know if you had it in your market. That was great. You got one free 6-inch sub and a drink.
I mean, Uber did like a free McDonald's coffee, for a while. I mean, even like small stuff like that, right? Like just kind of like adding a lot of that up, I think does over time, it sort of shows the company. And like, that's the thing, like it doesn't cost a lot of money for some of these. Like it doesn't have to be like everyone wants more money. Okay. That's kind of like obvious, but like, I think, I remember Lyft would give out this jacket after 1,000 trips. Right. And man, people love that jacket. Like it wasn't like a Patagonia or like $100 jacket or anything, but it just was like a nice, probably $30, $40, $50 jacket, had a little Lyft logo. And like when I would go to Lyft driver events, like all the OG drivers would be rocking it. And like this jacket was probably so cheap for Lyft for like the amount of loyalty and brand awareness and like just good feelings all around that they got from it. Like it's hard. I think it's probably hard for the company to like see the benefit of that on the the spreadsheets that they're calculating and like, oh my God, we spent millions of dollars on jacket. What did we get out of it? But I think stuff like that really does make an impact.
So for me, I would say onboarding, and I'm going to be careful here because I'm going to use Grubhub as an example, and they're not probably the shining example of a business.
Yeah, sure. Throw a company under the bus, whoever you want, Steve.
Well, I'm saying I think I like the way that Grubhub is onboarded.
Got it.
So like, let's say that like you need 2,000 drivers in LA on any given day. I mean, I know this is way wrong, but let's just say it's 2,000. If you want to onboard 4,000 to make sure that everything's double covered, I get that, but don't onboard 50,000.
Yeah.
I mean, because here's my thing. I've signed up for enough apps to know that I don't mind a waiting list.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I would prefer it. Don't put me on there if there's no business.
So sort of keeping it reasonably in balance, right? Like, I mean, I think the nice thing about the independent contractor model for all these companies and why Uber works so well, for example, or did pre-pandemic in a lot of places, is because they can sign up more drivers than they need, right? So that, if you're hiring employees, obviously you want to kind of like keep it perfectly in balance, right? Like how much demand do we have? Let's match that perfectly with supply. Otherwise you're paying for that additional supply, right? When they're independent contractors and they're not working, you don't have to pay them, right? So it sort of goes both ways. But the companies can, like, I guess it kind of goes back to that oversaturation point, right? That sometimes the companies take it too far, right?
I don't think that people would be like, oh, I'm on a waiting list. I'm going to actually take the time to, after I signed up, get my name off this waiting list. They're just going to move to another app. And then when they get up on that waiting list, and just don't make sure it's not like a year or anything like that they're on it. I mean, after a month, get them on there, because you would have lost that many people in the month anyway. Harry, Jason, we all know this. A lot of people just quit after 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
So the churn rate's pretty high. So I mean, like, you can always keep getting people on, but if they go and work for Lyft and they think this sucks, then they find out that they've been now approved to drive for Uber and that their slot has come up. They'll be more psyched, and now they got their training by Lyft or under the Lyft label.
Yeah.
So I feel like when oversaturation is going to happen. I don't doubt that. It's going to be in every market, and every one of these companies wants it. I think they could minimalize it a lot.
Yeah, the only ones that I know are Grubhub and Amazon Flex will waitlist you. The rest of them I was able to sign up, no problem.
Right, and usually drive the next day or something. And and I guess that goes to another point of mine that goes back to you, Harry, with what you were talking about with Jay. I've heard of other people. I know other people who Checker really messed things up for them.
Yeah.
And it was like, maybe it was the wrong person. Like the Checker background check was done on somebody else and they deactivated this person, and then the companies don't want to hear about it.
Yeah. They don't have the support to run it down. They're like, whatever, we don't care.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the next one.
Well, I'll give a quick shout out to one of the partners that we have. He's a lawyer, Larry Smith, and he actually specializes in helping drivers with deactivations over checker background issues. So it's like very specific. If you've been deactivated for other reasons, there's not as much that they can do, but there's like some interesting laws around like the Fair Credit Reporting Act and stuff like that. So people can check out Larry Smith. I think it's smithmarco.com, but we've been working with him a bit. But it is cool. Like there are a number of these services out there that obviously help drivers or lawyers or whoever it might be. So that's definitely cool to see. I guess one thing like along those lines, like one thing that I'd like to see improved in 2022, and I guess this is sort of like more, I don't know that this is going to happen. Maybe we'll do predictions in a second. So I'd say this is more like my wish list or my one item. The top of my item on my wish list is I think more protections for gig workers would be a good thing. Around things like pay, the things that everyone cares about, right? Like, we haven't really touched on like the employee independent contractor debate. That might be a separate topic. So maybe we'll stay away from that since we're running low on time here. But I think that there's so many things that every driver cares about, or like every driver wants to be paid more. Every driver does not want to be unfairly deactivated, right? Like every driver is worried potentially about oversaturation, right? Like there's like better customer support, right? Like there's a bunch of things, better loyalty programs, right? Like if you're a top driver, you should be rewarded, right? There's a bunch of things that like every driver cares about. And so I guess like that's what I would love to see, like either from third parties like Larry Smith, or, we've been, working, there's lots of companies out there that I think you guys have covered, like Solo. And, I just connected you guys with the Buckle guys, right? Like a new insurance product for gig delivery worker, right? There's all these like third party, I guess you would call them like third-party companies working on new products and services for gig workers. And then there's also, actually like cities doing stuff. So I really like the city of Seattle. We just did a big podcast with them, and, they have a minimum pay for drivers. They have a driver deactivation. They call it a driver resolution center. So Jason, like you were just talking about, if someone's unfairly deactivated, Uber and Lyft, if you're driving in the city of Seattle for Uber and Lyft have to tell you why you were deactivated. They can't send you like a list of 11 reasons and say, pick one, here's why you were deactivated, like they always do. And then you actually have the chance to like arbitrate that between like a neutral third party. And so I think like stuff like that is really cool. And then I guess the third group that could potentially, add more protections for drivers would be like the companies themselves. And this is sort of like the one I've got the least hope for. But, like I do think over time, the companies will do a better job of adding loyalty programs. Like Uber and Lyft and even DoorDash have dabbled in some of the loyalty programs, but, it's not super well thought out or robust. They've got a long ways to go. But I guess that would be kind of like the third group that could potentially, add more. So that's sort of like what I would like to see. I think there's like a lot of protections and benefits for gig workers out there that like matter to everyone. And that's kind of like what's on my wish list for what could be improved, going forward in 2022.
Yeah, I think, not getting into AB5 or any of that, I think you can still be an independent contractor, but still have those protections, right? I want to stay an independent contractor, but we need a little bit of help there in especially with the deactivations. I think.
Yeah, like I'll be honest, I'm going to keep harping on the Seattle thing because I think it's really cool what they've done. They've kept all the drivers as independent, and they're kind of like a very progressive, like labor forward city. So you would kind of imagine that they might be more on like, we should make everyone employees, but they've actually like gone the other route and said, let's keep everyone independent contractors, but add like the things that kind of, I think are really like a pay floor, right? So it's like not limiting your upside, right? But it's like, hey, let's say that drivers can't earn less than this amount. Let's like they have a $5, or what did they have? They have I think it's like I think it's like $5 or $7 or $10 minimum fare net to the drivers. So they've got like some cool protections in there for Uber and Lyft drivers in the city of Seattle that aren't like crazy, like, let's completely flip the script, but it's just like some nice benefits here and there, basically.
Are they able to work whenever they want and everything?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, it's still like work whenever you want. It's still independent contractor. It's just, riders have to pay a little bit more. There's like a per trip fee of, I think, 50 cents per trip now that the riders have to pay. And now drivers get that, driver resolution center and a couple other benefits. So
that driver resolution center sounds like something that every city needs. I don't know if this, I know that
Super
Solo
cool.
is getting ready to expand other cities right now.
Yeah.
I was just chatting with him about that, in fact, like a couple days ago. And but I think that the driver resolution center is key. I think every big city needs to, every state should have one, and it should be in your big city, and then start working them out a little bit more too. But almost like the green hub, or the like,
well, and I think that's what's
so
like,
now just let's do these. Let's do something important instead of, hey, come here and get a free keychain.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. That's where, like, I guess if you're optimistic about things, you could be like, wow, look at all. Well, so if you're pessimistic, it's like, look at all the shit that sucks, driving for Uber and Lyft in the gig economy. And if you're more of an optimist, you're like, okay, here are all the things that, suck or can be improved, right? Like, hey, there's all these opportunities. The companies can do more loyalty. Cities can add, more, like benefits like a driver resolution center. Because I said this in the podcast that I did with the City of Seattle team, like it's kind of like dehumanizing in a way to like wake up one day and it's like Uber says you've been deactivated, we're not going to tell you why, there's no one you can call, there's no one you can contact, like you were making $1,000 or $2,000 a week and now you got to go find something else, right? Like obviously drivers should have a backup plan and they should be diversified, but not everyone does that. And I just feel like it's like kind of like a shitty thing to do. And Uber, and I'm not like counting, like I would love the companies to kind of like go and, build all this out. Like, man, I would give so much credit to Uber or Lyft or DoorDash, like if they started their own driver resolution center or piloted some of this stuff. But that's where I'm kind of like, man, I'm not expecting too much from them on this department.
Well, then it gets a little sticky though, too, because who's running the is it Uber, DoorDash?
Yeah, but
Lyft,
you got to give them the chance at least.
Well, but I mean, it should be another party.
Yeah. So that's how the Seattle one works. I think they work with this group called, I think it's like, I don't want to botch the name, but there's a group in Seattle, I think Working Seattle or something like that. That's sort of a labor, organizing group. And they sort of, it's like a third party though, basically that runs this and they get paid from the city fees. So, I think definitely some cool stuff. So before we run out of time here, I want to do one last question for each of you. Any predictions for 2022, rideshare, gig economy, labor? We talked about a lot. What do you think might happen or might surprise people by the end of the year?
Mine's pretty simple. I do think Lyft is going to get bought by somebody. I really do. I don't know how.
That's a good one.
I don't know how. I've been thinking about this for the last 6 months. I don't even know how they're still in business. Like they would be like to pay that payroll, and I mean, no way. So I don't know whether it's Amazon, whether it's Google. I don't know. I think Lyft is going to get bought out by somebody, and maybe they shut it down and just grab the data. I don't know.
Interesting. Okay, that's a good prediction. I like that. Damn, Jason.
Let's just not have it be Uber that buys them out.
Yes, for the love of God.
Well, I think you're right, Jason. I mean, well, I don't know that you're right, but I think that's a good prediction. I don't know how likely it is to happen, but I think like I could easily see, like an Apple who's working on autonomous vehicles. Like, okay, they buy Lyft because then they want that network rideshare network to plug into their autonomous vehicles, or a Tesla that's worth, what? I don't know, $1 trillion, hundreds of billions, whatever Tesla is worth, right? Like Apple, Amazon, right? Like, I mean, there are a lot of really, wealthy companies out there that have made a lot of money during the pandemic. And kind of, I think the thing sometimes that gets forgotten about Lyft is that like, there's still like millions of rides happening every single day on rideshare, even though demand is down, maybe not as many people. Like before the pandemic, I think Uber was doing 8 million rides a day. So even if demand is like cut in half, 50%, they're still doing 4 million rides a day. And if Lyft is 25% of Uber, they're still doing 1 million rides a day. So it's kind of crazy to think about the numbers sometimes. It's like, wow, I haven't done a Lyft ride, or I don't know anyone doing a Lyft ride. Man, like somebody is taking Lyft rides, still.
Right.
So that's a good prediction. Well, you have any predictions, Steve?
Well, one, I think that more than ever, I think you need to diversify your gig platforms you work. I always said that, and I meant it, but I was a fan of rideshare. So I really liked doing rideshare. I've been in industries where I deal with people a lot through my whole life. So to me, that was even fun. I enjoyed it more than like food delivery and the solitude of being in the car. I don't know. I enjoyed it and I was doing well. I think that right now, W-2 jobs aren't even getting filled, and people are doubling the rates doubling the hourly rates. If something was
Yeah.
10, it's 20 now to go work at McDonald's or whatever. And they still can't fill those positions.
Mm-hmm.
But yet the gig economy is still flooded. So if you're wanting to stay in the gig economy, diversify, start looking and follow the money. Follow the money is the end thing. I mean, like if you just love Uber and you're like, I want to Uber, but you look around and you can make 3 times as much doing, and this is just example, do Shipt.
Yeah.
I mean, even though you love it, you're your own boss. And for a business, your own boss would say, get the money.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing I love, and why still, 7 years later, like I'm still doing gig economy stuff is, and covering it, right, is because like the downside to trying new services is so low, right? Like people like, do so much research and agonize about like a new service or who should I work for? Or who should I drive for? And I mean, it's important to do your due diligence, like spend an hour, spend a few hours, but like just go sign up, try it, do a shift or two, like watch a video or two. Like you can get a really high ROI by just a little bit amount of work. And it's so easy to try these services and you literally make money from day one, right? Like you can't lose money on any of these. Like you cannot lose money. I would, you know what I mean? Like I know people, like you literally can't lose money, right, on any of these services, right? Like you might sit there and lose time, but you can't lose money. You're going to get paid more than it costs to do these rides or do these trips. And so that's sort of the thing that I love. And kind of my whole, I'm happy to talk, I think we've covered some good positives and negatives about the gig economy, right? Like no job is perfect. Like there's plenty of issues with gig economy and driving for Uber and Lyft and delivery services like we talked about. But like, I definitely personally feel the positives outweigh the negatives. And I guess just my personal like take and like how I've run my business is like anyone that wants to do gig economy work, I'm not going to necessarily make a judgment on whether it's good or bad for you. Like if you want to do it though, I'm going to help you do it and make as much money as possible and, have the best time that you can have. So I guess my prediction is actually sort of that I think the earnings and opportunities are going to stay high and stick around, sort of similar to what you said, Steve. Like in 2022, I think it's going to, like, if you want to make $50 to $60 an hour driving Uber in LA, you're going to be able to do that for all of 2022. If you want to go find, new services, like you don't necessarily have to drive Uber and Lyft. You can find Walmart Spark, you can find, Shipt, you can try these new opportunities. There's so many companies like getting into this last mile delivery space. People want things faster and faster, right? And that requires workers to deliver it. And if the faster you want something, the more you kind of have to pay for it. So I just think that like I'm kind of bullish on the overall opportunity in the gig economy, that like if you want to take advantage of it, and like I think the earnings are really going to stay high because of like the trends within the gig economy and last mile delivery, but also just like, macro labor, right? We talked about like, a lot of people are like sitting on their butts, working, not working, or, sitting in you're doing crypto. So I just feel like the opportunities and the new income and stuff like that are going to stick around for all of 2022. I don't think we're going to see, I think like things have changed, like before the pandemic, right? Like, the number one complaint was, I don't make enough on Uber and Lyft, or I don't make enough in these services. And if, frankly, over the past year, if I saw people complaining about their earnings, I kind of like, that's more of a you problem. Like I think you got to get out there. You know what I mean? You got to train yourself up. You got to look for opportunities. And like before the pandemic, I was totally on board. Like, man, number one complaint, got to get paid more, got to earn more. But like, I don't think you can really make that complaint anymore for now, at least. If you want to strike, that could go away in any instant and could disappear, and there's plenty of issues still, but I do feel like that's going to stick around for 2022.
Yeah, I think that's a good prediction. I like your attitude of like, it's your fault, because there's so many apps. You can't really blame just Uber and or Lyft. Now you got like 17 other ones. And
well, I mean, if people are listening to this podcast, now they know like I should keep an eye out for Walmart Spark. We gave them 3 great ideas. Walmart Spark, Shipt, and GoPuff are 3 like great ideas. And, Curry. Yeah. I mean,
he's all earned good.
Right. If we, if you have them in your city, go try them out and check them out and be like, man, you guys were full of shit, or wow, I earned a lot, or sign up for the wait list for like when, if a $20 billion company like GoPuff is going to launch in your market, they're probably going to have pretty good sign up bonuses. They're probably going to have pretty good guaranteed earnings at the start. It may not last forever, but if you kind of are ready for it and know about it and take advantage, right? That's sort of what, and there's so many of those services launching, right? I mean, we talked about, you talked about Curry. There's also Point Pickup. There's also Bite Squad. There's Grubhub. There's, and then all the big ones too. But there's so many that people have never even heard about too.
There's like four other Curries too.
Yeah, oh, really?
I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I downloaded one of them's Freight something.
Yeah, you can deliver.
They're doing the same type of thing, but they're starting to follow that model.
You can deliver alcohol in California and probably Colorado. I'm guessing weed delivery is pretty big, right? Like weed delivery in California, you're an employee and you get reimbursed for mileage and you get tips. So it's like you can actually make pretty good money on some of these weed delivery services. So, there's so many opportunities out there. So I definitely feel like for gig workers, pretty bullish. And I guess the thing I like is it's like, for me personally, more fun to talk about, the exciting opportunities versus like, hey, if Uber and Lyft cut rates, I'm happy to, take them to the grindstone, but I'd prefer to talk about like new and exciting opportunities, but you can't control.
Harry, do you remember when, like around the time that you were starting this podcast, like that it was underground dubbed the hustle.
Yeah.
Okay. Then people stopped using that term altogether. It kind of just disappeared. I think we're back to the hustle. I think that's the way I'd put it, is that now you got to hustle again. Don't just have Uber app and go, this is what I work.
Yeah.
If you're a gig employee or if you work the gig economy and you love Uber, that's great. But, just be ready. And even if you're not signing up for them, look into them so you're ready, whatever. Start looking into some of these ones you've just been ignoring.
For sure.
Do even if it's not signing up, just do some research, because ask some other people, because you might find out that you're making half of what they are in your market. Because like Harry said, you can make up to 60 in LA. I don't know what it is right now in Denver would be like the average for rideshare, but it always was high when I was doing it. But right now there's some apps that were, look at food delivery. You couldn't make $1 before the pandemic.
Yeah. Food delivery was not a great earning
tons.
opportunity. Yeah. I feel like drivers, on average, were reporting to us like $10 to $15 an hour on average.
Right.
And there's definitely a lot more variability in food delivery, right? Like there's some places where you probably still are making $10 an hour driving for certain services, but there's others where you can make, significantly more. So I think that's a great note to wrap on. It was really fun having you guys on, hearing a little recap of last year and a few predictions and things to look forward to in 2022. If folks want to get more of each of you, can you, why don't we start with you, Steve? Can you tell them where to find you, where they can get your podcast, YouTube channel, website, and I'll put this in my show notes too, and maybe you guys can each do the same.
Yeah, I'll do the same. UberLiftDrivers.com for just news and just kind of keeping up with things. If you like we were just talking about, if you want to learn about other platforms, go in there and search it. Search Grubhub. You'll come up with a bunch of stuff on it, and you can do that. RideshareRodeo.com is the podcast, but we're on, obviously, like Harry and Jason, we're on every podcast platform. So any podcatcher we're on. So you can listen wherever you want. And then also Jason and I have been doing a show on TNC Radio Live where they play your stuff, my stuff, and Jason. So it's weird the three of us are together today, because they play our stuff in replay over there. And then Jason and I do a live radio show, a call in on Friday nights over there. So, call in and have fun with us. We love talking to you, and we'll just shoot the breeze with you. So
very cool. Jason?
Yeah, mine's pretty easy. Just search the Gig Economy podcast in your Google search bar and hit enter, and it's everything you need to know about it. So on YouTube,
very cool,
where all the player apps and all that fun stuff. So it's pretty easy to find.
Yep. And I think we're pretty easy to find too. Just type the Rideshare Guy into any box on the internet, and hopefully we should pop up in some form, manner, or fashion. But yeah, definitely pop over if you enjoyed this podcast. I do a weekly show interviewing everyone from drivers and folks like Jason and Steve covering the industry to executive, academic, media, sort of look at everything. So Rideshare Guy podcast. And Steve, Jason, it was a lot of fun having you two on, and we'll look forward to maybe we'll have to do it again next year or even sooner.
Yeah. Thanks
All
for
right.
the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah.